It's called the Omega 1 and it's a rotary engine with no seals. It has barely any moving parts and has almost zero losses in the combustion cycle. With a traditional internal combustion engine, you lose stacks of energy through heat and friction. While with this new engine by Astron Aerospace, they aim to eliminate nearly all losses associated with the internal combustion engine. Now, when I initially looked at this engine, I thought, well, this isn't that cool. It's really just a fancy high-revving Wankel rotary, like the ones you'll find in a Mazda. While I looked into it more, and it really isn't. It's a rotary, but it has zero seals, and the engine is super efficient, super lightweight, and doesn't take up much space. A single 16 kilogram engine develops 160 horsepower and 230 Nm of torque. This thing revs all the way to 25,000 RPM, which is insanely high for an internal combustion engine. All the power of a single engine is multiplied by the number of engines that may be placed end to end. So let's say you have 3 rotors. You would have 480 horsepower and the total weight of all 3 motors would be 48 kilograms. I mean, that's nothing, and it makes a whole bunch of power. Now, how does this engine work? Aerodynamic forces are eliminated since the engine is air-cooled. Rotating shafts encircle the engine openings, and both upper and lower shafts counter-rotate. The design splits the 4-stroke combustion cycle into 2, the one part for intake and compression, and the other for combustion and exhaust. The intake air is compressed and travels through a rotary valve to the pre-chamber between the rotors, where fuel is injected, and when it enters the power side of the rotor, it ignites, driving the rotor. And then it leaves through the exhaust port. Now this engine has no seals like I previously mentioned, but how? How does it keep the compression and everything high if it has no seals? Well, very tight tolerances are key for the lack of rotor seals, as are the higher RPMs involved since there is not enough time for the air to leak when running. The engine also features a supercharged air intake running at crazy high pressures. Now, where most internal combustion engines run between 10 and 20 psi, this engine forces in over 200 psi into the motor. Now, Astron Aerospace recommended using hydrogen as a fuel source for running the engine, and in doing so the emissions will be practically nothing, and since they weigh so little, they won't add very much weight to a car. A lighter car means the engine doesn't have to work very hard. This tech is freaking awesome. Now, one more cool thing I thought I had to mention. So when you drive fast, the engine will combust on every rotation of the rotors, thus giving it the maximum power and the maximum torque. But let's say you are just cruising at a steady pace. The engine can skip fire. In other words,